And so we'll give you an update as to what we're doing with our campaigns, why it's particularly key right now to ensure that everyone has access to vaccines across the world and to increase the global supply. Then I want to tell you about our democracy campaign, which is so relevant right now, because as you know, there's been a coup in Myanmar, ongoing protests in Belarus are being cracked down upon, and freedom struggles are happening all across the world in the face of authoritarianism. And so we launched a campaign a while ago, and I want to update you because it's becoming very, very timely with the upcoming G7 summit. So I'll tell you about this as well. Finally, I want to discuss our amazing community. We just opened teams in 27 cities, which is a lot across the world. From Ecuador to India, we open teams all over the place, and you have a chance to be part of it. So as always, please ask me all of your questions in the comment sections on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. I'm trying to monitor it all at the same time, so I might just take a bit of time to get to it, but I'll answer your questions. And so let's get to it. And as I promised, I want to start discussing vaccines without borders. So to give you a quick background, almost a year ago now, when we just got into the pandemic at now, a lot of our members came to us, especially from countries like Brazil, and told us, look, we are worried that when a vaccine will be available, we won't have access to it. And some of our members are health workers on the front line who were trying to deal with the intake of COVID-19 patients and were already putting themselves at risk. And at first, we were not sure whether to tackle this campaign, whether to tackle COVID as a campaign, just because we were just born as a movement, we're very new. But we quickly realized that as a global movement, we had to say something about the fact that in most places across the world, people won't get access to COVID-19 vaccines fast because a few rich countries hoarded them. So at first, we started a campaign focusing on health workers to ensure that health workers would get priority access to COVID-19 vaccines, regardless of where they're from in the world. And we did this campaign with the support of health workers from all across the world ahead of the World Health Assembly last year. And we actually got a reply from Dr. Tedros, who's the head of the WHO, telling us that he believed that this was super important. And the term health workers first that we tried to put forward really became quite important in the last few months. So that was the first success. And then we started having vaccines, which is a great thing. A lot of companies had a super quick innovation cycle and managed to produce vaccines very, very fast. You know, it's the case of AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, and a few others, which is amazing. A lot of countries are managing to vaccinate at a very high speed, like the UK, for example, and that's all positive. However, there are a few underlying issues with this. And this is just to explain why we launched a campaign on the topic. One of the underlying issues is that, and I personally believe that it's a fundamental one, there's simply not enough vaccines. This means companies don't have the capacity to produce enough vaccines for the world population. So the current rate of production and vaccination, it's estimated that the whole world population won't have access to it before 2023 or 2024. And that's in a very long time. And that's really problematic on a certain number of levels, including the fact that as a result, we won't reach global herd immunity. What this means is basically the virus stopped being transmitted normally in the general population. And if a lot of places don't have access to vaccines, more variants will be born. So, you know, we talk a lot about the Brazilian variant, about the South African one, and so on. But this will continue to happen if we don't vaccinate the whole world population. So I know it's really scary and really negative in a lot of ways, but there's actually a very simple solution, to the fact that we don't have enough COVID-19 vaccines. And it's for companies who have a vaccine like Pfizer to enable other companies to create it. So traditionally, when you create a product, I'm putting it in very simple terms, you have IP rights on it, and other companies can create the same one to protect your research, innovation cycle, and so on. Except that right now we are in the midst of a pandemic, and companies are holding on to their IP rights, etc., which means that others can't produce vaccines and save lives. So what we are asking at now is for companies like Pfizer to share their licensing, which is basically the recipe of how to make a vaccine, and the technology with companies in low-income countries so companies who couldn't buy it normally, so that themselves can produce vaccines and save lives quicker. I know it sounds quite complicated, but it's actually very, very simple. We don't have enough vaccines. Simple truth. In rich countries, companies can buy the licensing, so basically the IP rights, to redo a vaccine. Great. This is already happening in certain places. Low-income countries and middle-income countries don't have that luxury a lot of the time, which means that their populations are not getting access to COVID-19 vaccines, which is ethically wrong and practically very stupid, because it means that we won't reach global herd immunity and more variants will be created. So what we are doing is we launch a campaign called Vaccines Without Borders. I see Andrea already commenting on this with the links, which is great, so you can partake. The idea is that we are doing an email campaign to the CEO of Pfizer, Pfizer being one of the big vaccine companies that is producing vaccines, asking him to share the vaccine with companies, again, in low and middle income countries. So I already received a lot of questions and comments saying, oh, well, this is against profit making and so on. My number one response is, we're in the midst of a pandemic. A lot of businesses are suffering. There's no reasons for big pharma to be the only one to profit from this pandemic. And the second one is, it's actually not. Because what we're asking is for low and middle income countries, which means that Pfizer will still be able to make an enormous amount of profit in Europe, in the US, etc. We're just saying for countries who can't afford it, we need to get out of this pandemic fast. So we need Pfizer to share its vaccines with others. So that's one of the elements. And the second question I received a lot ahead of this live, and please don't hesitate again to ask me all of the questions you have. I'm super happy to answer them. Was why Pfizer? Why only Pfizer? Why not other companies like Moderna, AstraZeneca, and all of the newest ones? And the truth is, we're targeting Pfizer because some other companies have taken positive steps to share their vaccines so that we can have more vaccines, get out of this pandemic faster, and save lives. So, for example, Moderna said that they wouldn't enforce patent rights until, I think, October, so that other companies can replicate the vaccines and create it. It's not enough. Super simply, patent rights are not enough to create a vaccine, but at least it's a small positive step. So that's good. And then AstraZeneca already said that it wouldn't be making profits during the duration of the pandemic on its vaccine. Again, not enough, but good. Pfizer is not doing anything and is going the complete other way. Again, we're in the midst of the pandemic. Every moment wasted not sharing the vaccine is a moment where people die and their lives could be saved. So that's why we're targeting Pfizer. It doesn't mean we won't target other vaccine manufacturing companies in the future. We want to expand the campaign. We want to target member states of the WHO to make sure that they force companies to share their licensing on the long term with low-income countries if needed, if companies don't do it on their own. But in the meanwhile, there's a real urgency. This is not just a debate about IP rights, about profit, and so on. There's the fact that we're in the midst of the pandemic. People are dying every single day by the millions since the beginning of the pandemic. And we have the power to stop this by manufacturing more vaccines and ensuring that more people have access to it. So we decided to simply go to Pfizer and ask them to do the right thing. I know it sounds idealist, but I hope it's that if enough people join, and we already in the first weeks had hundreds of people from all over the world who went on our website. I see that a few people posted the link already. I'm sure my team will post it again on the different social medias. You can go on our websites and send an email to the CEO of Pfizer asking him to share the licensing and tech of the vaccines with companies elsewhere. And one last thing I wanted to mention was I was asked a lot about the safety of vaccines ahead of the live and about, thank you, Andrea. I see that Andrea shared the link on Instagram, so you can find it there. And I'm sure he'll do the same on Facebook. I just saw that now shared the link on Facebook as well. So I was asked a lot about variants as well, mutations, and the safety of vaccines. And the point of getting vaccinated when there are so many variants and we don't know what will happen tomorrow. What we do know about vaccines is that some vaccines don't work as well on some variants. So it looks from preliminary studies like it's the case of the AstraZeneca vaccine that doesn't work very well on the South African variant. This is yet another argument to actually share the Pfizer vaccine. Pfizer, we don't have enough studies yet, but it looks like it's quite promising. In the meanwhile, we don't have enough supply. The world won't get vaccinated until 2024. Other vaccines are not proving effective in the face of the variants and mutations. we need to make sure that we vaccinate as many people as possible quickly, which means ensuring that as many companies as possible in low and middle income countries get access to the licensing and the technology of Pfizer so that they can replicate the vaccine and save lives. It's really that simple. I'll repeat it one last time, then I stop, I promise. But it's literally making sure that you put lives over profit. So it's just sharing the vaccine, giving access to low-income countries who can't afford the licensing, and making sure that we get out of this pandemic fast. This is even without going into the ethical aspect of I'm in my 20s, I live in the UK, I'll probably get access to a vaccine before someone who's at risk over the age of 70 in a lot of countries across the world. And this is wrong on every single level. So join us. It literally takes 2 seconds to go on our website, click on the links that my team has posted already on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram. I see them everywhere. Literally go on our website and you can send an email, you can personalize it. It's super simple. It will take you less than 1 minute to make sure that we share the vaccine. In our next live next week, Andrea will be doing it and he'll be announcing some of the actions we plan. We're not only doing a email campaign, we'll also do some on-the-ground stunts in front of certain buildings to make sure that Pfizer gets the message. And we'll announce it very, very soon. I'm quite excited about this. At the very least, we are knowing them a lot, which is a good news. I'm just checking the comments. I see that someone asked about our local team in Brussels and how to join a local team. I'll get to the community teams in just a second, but you can join now from all over the world. We are present in 120 countries, and we have local teams that are working at the community level to impact change in tens of cities across the world, and we're running those global campaigns all over. So just go on our website. If you go on the community page, you'll see points where you can join your local teams or create one. And if you're interested in this, Andrea, my co-founder, and I will be taking you through all of the steps on how to do it. It's really easy and it's a lot of fun. However, before getting into this, I just quickly wanted to talk about Freedom Campaign. Just checking the comments at the same time. I saw a comment saying, sorry, I'll go back to vaccines just because I didn't answer one question. The vaccine situation is very scary. Is the new WTO head in line with our request? So WTO is World Trade Organization. There's a new head that was appointed, I think, yesterday. And she actually said today that vaccine nationalism is extremely dangerous to get out of the crisis. So those are obviously not her exact words, but she explained that there's no other way but to get out of this crisis together. That with all of the new mutations, we need to make sure that we act fast and in a coordinated manner. The truth is that even if the UK, I'm taking the UK again because it's the country in which I am, vaccinates all of its population, if the rest of the world is not vaccinated, it's pointless. New variants will come and bite us here. We have literally no choice but to do it together. So that's, yes, she's in line with our request. She said it yesterday in an interview. Just for Lulu de Bruxelles, who asked whether that we have a team in Brussels, you are on Facebook, but I see Anita on Instagram, who's our team lead, saying that she's super happy to welcome you. So if you sign up, you will be put in touch with our amazing team lead in Brussels, Anita, who will take you through all of our different campaigns and the way to get involved. Thanks, Anita, for commenting. If you want to directly get in touch, I see Lulu on the Facebook live. Sorry, I'm also coordinating between different social media, so that's why it's not always super organized. So now I wanted to quickly tell you about our Freedom Campaign. So some of you may know, but basically we launched a campaign to support freedom struggles from Hong Kong to Venezuela last July. The idea being that in front of repression and authoritarianism, people often need support in order to be able to ensure that democracy thrives, survives, or is restored. So we started focusing on Hong Kong, but we quickly expanded. And the way we've been doing this is by organizing protests in front of government buildings across the world, in all continents. We've organized protests in over 50 cities across the world, especially, it depends on, when a city is in lockdown or not, but we've been doing it for 6 months, asking governments one thing: to come together, be among democracies, unite and coordinate responses. And the reason for which we've been doing this is pretty simple. It's basically that one government alone doesn't have much power to be able to stand up to authoritarianism. Sorry, someone is knocking on my door, so I'm just trying to mute myself at the same time. Perfect. So one government alone doesn't have much power to stand up to authoritarianism at the same alone. And you saw it with Australia. When Australia tried to stand up to China, following the genocide against Uyghur people, following the crackdown on Hong Kong with the national security law and the arrest of many lawmakers and so on, Australia was directly paid by tariffs. And the truth is, this is really heavy on a country's economy. And this is why a lot of countries are not acting or only issuing weak statements of condemnation. It's because they don't have support from others. So what we are asking is for democracies to come together to coordinate targeted sanctions against those responsible. And this way, they will be able to support one another and to have a common front against authoritarianism. We're not just talking about economic sanctions. We also want diplomatic sanctions to coordinate lifeboat policies and to ensure that basically freedom fighters are protected and that we stand united with them. So we've been protesting, demanding this. And, I was asked a few times in those lives in the past, can protests actually achieve change? Is that a way forward? Well, yes, they can. And I can tell you why. We've had politicians from a lot of countries reach out wanting to support our request and working with us behind the scene to make sure that this idea is put forward. And we have a forum to bring it forward. The UK is hosting the G7, which is a meeting of some of the 7 biggest, richest democracies in the world. It's hosting it in June. And we are targeting the G7 and G7 officials to bring forward this request for a League of Democracies. We are asking them to start discussing the idea of democracies coming together to protect democracy, protect freedom fighters, but also hold each other accountable. Because if you look at the G7, it's not like any of the countries have perfect democracies. Perfect democracy doesn't exist. But, we saw what happened in the US with the riots. We see what's happening in a lot of democracies with rights going back in the midst of a pandemic and so on. So we want those countries to also hold each other accountable and improve by sharing best practices. One thing I was also asked ahead of this live in some of the comments was why the G7? It's a bit exclusive. It's mainly Western countries. It's not inclusive. It's a bit of a representation of the old world that we're trying to move away from. And I completely agree with that. We don't want the G7 to be the only countries forming the group. We think that all democracies, and there are rankings of democracies and which countries are actually democratic and so on. We think that all democracies should join this alliance, this League of Democracies, and work together. We are just targeting the G7 because we need to start somewhere, and it's one of those forums that is getting a lot of press attention. But behind the scenes, we're also working with officials from Taiwan, with activists and politicians from Venezuela, from Hong Kong, from a lot of places across the world. So it's not just the G7. And so we're working very, very hard to make this happen. So yet again, and I have a request for you. If you can, on Fridays, join us for Fridays for Freedom. What it means is attend one of the protests we organize. You can find them on Facebook and on our website in your city if it's allowed with COVID, or take a picture of yourself with a Fridays for Freedom sign and post it on social media, tagging us. Will amplify your voice. If you want to be more active, join the movement. Our social media manager, Zoe, will post a link on how to become a member. And you will work with me on lobbying politicians in your country to bring forward this request whenever possible. So right now we're working on introducing bills to create a League of Democracy in Italy. We're lobbying the Foreign Secretary in the UK, and we're working with politicians in the US and in Taiwan on making this happen. If you join us, you'll be able to support us in doing this, and you'll also have fun lobbying politicians all across the world. And this is particularly important considering what's happening. So as I said, sorry, talking alone a lot hurts a bit the voice. As I said, 2 weeks ago, there was a coup in Myanmar. So Myanmar has a complicated history with democracy. The military ruled the country for a long time. And then there was hope of a democratic transition at the beginning of it with elections, and with the Nobel Prize winner who was started to informally lead the country, but then didn't really take action and didn't condemn the Rohingya genocide. So it's a really complicated history. But 2 weeks ago, there was a coup. People went down in the elected leaders were imprisoned. People went down in the streets and protested, which is something extremely brave, especially in a place like Myanmar that has a history of violent repression of protests, of imprisonment and worse, of people making their voices heard. And thousands of people have been in the streets. There have been walkouts of key jobs targeted at key industries for the military to keep power. And this is amazing to see. But we need the international community to take action. We've seen a lot of statements of condemnation saying that this cannot go on, that elected leaders must be released, and so on. And we 100% agree with this, but there needs to be more. Considering the fact that the military is trying to pass a law, or just passed a law, saying that protesters can face 20 years in jail for protesting, we need to make sure that there are targeted sanctions, diplomatic and economic, against the military leaders responsible for the coup, so that we support the people in Myanmar that are trying to restore democracy. So this is what we're doing with this campaign. I'm mentioning Myanmar, but this is relevant in Hong Kong, where I'm seeing a lot of comments on Facebook saying Hong Kong is becoming a prison, freedom is expensive, everyone needs to know that. And I couldn't agree more. This is happening in Hong Kong. You're seeing also setback on democracy in Venezuela. Cuba has been struggling for so long. It's all over the place. So we need to come together and we need to take action. So join us and do it. And finally, 2 last quick points before I log off. One, about our community. So I already had a few questions of how to join the local teams and how to be able to be involved with now. Super easy. You go on our website. We've opened 27 local teams in the last 3 weeks. What local teams do is they create local initiatives based on our campaigns. So for example, we have a team in Tulsa, in Oklahoma, in the US, that is working on changing the city regulations to ensure that solar panels are built on every single new building. We have a team in India that is working on educating women about their rights and changing laws at state level to make sure that there's more accountability on violence against women, especially rape. We have teams all over the place taking a lot of actions on local topics that are global in nature to make sure that they impact change. So join us, go on our website, we'll walk you through it, we'll work together on it. You'll join a global community of leaders from all across the world that are taking action. And you'll be able to really change the world with us. And finally, just a quick info. In 2 days, on Thursday, we'll host a virtual town hall. Virtual town halls are events online we host with a speaker where you can directly interact with them. With Scott Santers, who's an expert on universal basic income. So the idea that you get a basic income regardless of your working status, etc. He works in the US, but we're going to have a discussion with him about the validity of universal basic income, whether it's the way forward for a more just and fair world, and how we could apply this to the whole world. So if you want to join, Zoe will be posting the link as well on all different social medias, but it's a great opportunity to learn more about the topic. I'm super excited about it and to be able to discuss it. And don't hesitate to continue to send us all of your questions via DM. We'll answer them, and to join in our group. I hope you enjoyed the live. I'm sorry, I have no more voice, so I'm speaking a bit less loudly. But it's been great talking to you. Remember, join our Wave of Freedom by signing the petition that Andrea just posted and Zoe just posted on Facebook, and help us by organizing Fridays for Freedom protests. I know it sounds big. It's not. You can just comment, and I'll walk you through it. Make sure that you put human lives over profit by sending an email to the CEO of Pfizer so that he shares his vaccines with companies in low-income countries. Super easy. You go on the website, you send an email, and join the community. You have access to really cool events like the one on UBI, and you'll join a community of amazing doers. That's it on my side. I hope you have a good night, a good week, and that, you take action with us to change the world.